WWE Clash in Paris 2025 takes place on Sunday. 5 matches currently announced for the card. Go figure. It's a WWE PLE in 2025. We're going to make some predictions for how things could unfold at this particular PLE. Let's start with the most recent addition to the card. Becky Lynch is going to defend the Women's Intercontinental Championship against Nikki Bella. These two have had a very interesting war of words over the past, month or so now, I guess. And it's gotten a little personal between these two. And I think it's one where clearly they were sort of headed in this direction at some point. We mentioned last month, if you go back to July, who knows kind of what the initial plans were going to be for Nikki Bella and how that was thrown off back when Liv Morgan got injured. It seemed like they were definitely headed towards something with Nikki and Liv, whether that was going to be the tag team match with Liv and Raquel against the Bella Twins at Evolution or just a simple one-on-one match between Liv and Nikki. Something was set, right? But then the injury kind of derails things. You've had Nikki Bella kind of in a waiting, holding pattern, I guess you could say. And now she clearly gets to Becky Lynch here. And again, they may have initially decided they were going to do this anyways, but this is the next step for her. And now we see, can she win the Women's Intercontinental Championship? I think for this one, a lot of the focus is going to be on just how good is this match, right? Because it is Nikki stepping into a pretty high-profile spot here against the man. And I keep saying I think Becky Lynch is doing some of the best work of her entire career right now. And I know she reached a level that perhaps no one has reached in WWE on the women's division whenever she main evented WrestleMania, and kind of the heights that she reached when she had that initial burst of popularity several years ago. But right now, just in terms of her actual work, both on the mic, both in the ring, she's been fantastic. And I don't think WWE is going to be taking the title off of her anytime soon. Right now, I think you're going to be waiting, and who does that? Maybe it's Bayley, who kind of has, we know, kind of a pretty interesting situation going on right now with all these videos they're doing with her. Can't be Lyra Valkyria because she can't challenge Becky as long as she's the champion. But you would think Becky's going to eventually move back into the women's world title picture at some point, but not right now. My prediction, Becky Lynch gets a big win over Nikki Bella here, and what's next for Becky, we'll find out maybe coming out of this. All right, to the old-fashioned Donnybrook match, the good old-fashioned Donnybrook match between Sheamus and Rusev. These two are finally going to settle the score here, and is it going to be a banger? Prediction, it's going to be a banger, because these two, I think, will beat the hell out of each other, and that's no surprise, because every match they've had so far has been very hard-hitting, and, I think it is something where, speaking of the Intercontinental Championship, these are two guys that I think are in sort of, intriguing spots in their WWE careers right now. We know Rusev made his return not long ago, and we know that kind of for him, it feels like, okay, it's sort of just been go out, showcase your initial strength. He was facing Tozawa, and they have the match with Otis, I think, and you just kind of had some of that stuff that you had to get out of the way to sort of reestablish that this is this dominant beast, right? Well, then he gets into the feud with Sheamus, and these two, of course, they have the chemistry because they've known each other forever. They worked with each other way back when in WWE, and so you've had no issues with that. But I think it is a matter of what level do they see a Rusev at, right? Coming out of this, what level does he go to? Does he go into the Intercontinental title picture? Could he eventually be someone that is in the World Heavyweight Championship type picture? I think that, to me, is probably the most compelling thing coming out of whatever happens here is what's next for both of these guys. And I did throw Sheamus in there for a reason, because we know with Sheamus, the one story they still kind of have with him is chasing that elusive Intercontinental Championship. And I think you could definitely get there at some point with Sheamus to where he finally does win the title. And again, that kind of feels like the level that you're going to see Sheamus at for a while. I don't know that Sheamus is going to be in the World Heavyweight title picture or anything like that, but that's probably the best story for him. I think coming out of this, for Rusev, I think it's a little bit more unknown. Again, what level do they see him at, and where do you kind of move him next? And could he be in a feud with someone perhaps that is one of the losers in the World Heavyweight Championship match? Could you have him kind of have a one-on-one program with one of those guys? That's a potential option. There's some other things as well, but I think this is kind of something where it's a big match for both men, but my prediction is that Rusev reigns supreme here and gets the win, because I think that they probably do, at least right now, maybe see a bit of a higher ceiling for Rusev in terms of how they want to use him moving forward, but I don't know exactly what that looks like because, like I said, right now he's just it's been a slow burn, as with a lot of things in WWE. It's a slow burn to see what's next for Rusev, but I think he gets kind of the win here to cap off this rivalry between these two. All right, two of the singles matches, we know, very high profile in this one, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what main events this show. I don't think it's going to be this one. Roman Reigns versus Bronson Reed, with everything on the line here. And by everything, I mean the Shula Fala, perhaps the name of the tribal thief, all kinds of stuff on the line in this big match. And again, it's a match that's been built off of a man stealing another man's sneakers. And that's good enough for me. In professional wrestling, there's been a lot sillier stuff that people have fought over in a professional wrestling ring. But I think, as we've said before, we've talked about kind of the direction for Roman Reigns too. What does it look like for him over the next 6 months, 8 months as you head into WrestleMania 42? I've told you guys, you can check out the video we've done here on the channel about how I still think that one of your likely options could be Reigns versus Rollins at WrestleMania 42 as one of your main events on those 2 nights in Vegas. And I think to get there, it may be something where they're kind of setting up the gauntlet of division, right? Where it is Reigns going to have to go through Bronson Reed. And then maybe he is going to have to go through Braun Breaker at some point. Although I've mentioned my reasons why before, I think Braun Breaker beating Roman Reigns when they do have that eventual one-on-one match would not be the worst idea, because that sort of establishes Breaker into a next sort of tier where everybody already sees the potential. And to get there, a win like that would sort of be your career-defining win to this point for Braun Breaker. But I do think now that they're doing this with Reed, you would think there's going to be the eventual singles match with Braun Breaker to get Reigns to that singles match with Seth Rollins. And I've also talked about kind of tying in the history and how if they were to have the match at WrestleMania 42, you could do it 1 year after Heyman screws over Reigns, screws over Punk at WrestleMania 41 in the exact same location in Las Vegas. So I think there's a lot of stuff you can work with there story-wise. And I think this is one too, where was this really ever the plan? Did they have the initial plan to go with this, or did this, stealing the shoes and the sneakers take off so much that they decided we got to run with it? I have to feel like, this was kind of something that they were looking at as an option. But remember, Reigns was not initially advertised for Clash in Paris. And I think that is something, you kind of look at here and wonder, was this sort of a late, shift in terms of how they decided to do this match or when they decided to do this match? And so I think that's kind of an interesting thing too. But we know in the short term, Reigns has got to go film the role in Street Fighter. Cody Rhodes is, I guess, doing the same thing right now based on the story they've been telling with him and Drew McIntyre. You would think they're going to run that at WrestlePalooza. But I think the biggest thing here and what we're going to see is that the numbers game has been the story for, Seth Rollins, Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, and Paul Heyman. But I think in this one, you had the tag team win for Roman and Jey at SummerSlam. And I think Roman's going to get kind of his revenge here on Bronson Reed as well, as he's going to be victorious. And that is the prediction, that Roman Reigns wins and he gets his sneakers back, because there's nothing like having a little device like that. Remember, we had the bracelet with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. We've had all kinds of stuff like that in WWE over the past couple of years. But I think Reigns gets the Shula Fala back, and he is victorious in Paris against Bronson Reed. And then it remains to be seen when perhaps we see Reigns again. May not be until Survivor Series. And like I said, I think you probably have him in some sort of war game setting. And then from there, do you have the one-on-one matches with Breaker and eventually Seth Rollins? All right, as I said, the other singles match that's very sort of anticipated here, perhaps not for the match, but what could happen either in the match or after the match. And I'm going to tell you what that may be in a second. But you do have John Cena versus Logan Paul. And will this main event? I'm not sure. And I think the question is going to come down to, what do they have planned outside of just these two? And of course, that means, what do they have planned potentially for Brock Lesnar? Because this is kind of your opportunity to where, if you're going to set up that as the main event for WrestlePalooza, which I think is absolutely going to be the case. I don't think they're dragging this out until October. If you're going to do that, this is the place to probably have Lesnar show up and attack John Cena again, or however you're going to do it, right? Sure, they could do it on an episode of SmackDown, but I don't think it's going to have the same kind of impact as it would if you're doing it here. Now, Brock Lesnar got to fly over to Paris for that to happen, but I think that it is kind of an idea that they could be working with, because remember, you had the segment where Nick Aldis at the end of SmackDown came out and was, basically about to say something to John Cena about Brock Lesnar. But it was Logan Paul who knocked out Cena, and that was kind of the way, that they ended the show after Drew McIntyre talked up Logan Paul and told him he had to make things right, and he did, but Aldis had something to say about Lesnar. So I would think that was there for a reason. We all know we're getting to that match at some point, and I think this is one where I told you guys back even in June, right? It seemed like they were teasing John Cena versus Logan Paul all the way back in June, whenever they teamed up and you started to see kind of the initial rift literally in the first segment the two had together in the ring. They were already teasing them breaking up. And it didn't really play into the story then, but it does play into the story now where they were eventually going to have that one-on-one match. Even Cena himself is like, people are pissed off because you're getting one of my matches instead of, other people like an AJ Styles, a Seth Rollins or Dominic or anybody like that. So I think this is one where Cena's going to win. I would be surprised if he doesn't, although Cena has put over Logan Paul, in interviews both on the screen in WWE. He just did it on SmackDown and outside of it. So would Cena maybe giving Logan Paul the rub here be a possibility? I would never say never on that because, like I said, if you were to have a Brock Lesnar interference, sure, Lesnar could cost Cena the match here, and it could be kind of a shocking thing where Logan Paul can use this for years and years to come. He beat John Cena one-on-one, right? That could be something they could do, but I still am going to make my prediction that John Cena wins. I just think that's probably the better option here. But like I said, it really all depends on whether you want to do the thing with Lesnar, if they're going to do it here, during the match, which could cost Cena, or he does it after the match, after Cena has already, emerged victorious over Logan Paul. All right, and then, like I said, I don't know if it's going to be the main event or not. I'm not sure. I think you could have a situation where this could even kick off the show, and maybe you do Cena and Paul in the main event if you're going to have Brock Lesnar show up. Multiple options here. But it is the World Heavyweight Championship match, the Fatal 4-Way, CM Punk, LA Knight, Jey Uso, and Seth Rollins. And I think if you watch the previous video I did on the channel, I talked about just sort of feeling sort of a lull in WWE television week to week right now. And honestly, this match right here is one of the reasons, not necessarily the entire reason, but it may be one of the reasons, because I do think there are some compelling things here, right? CM Punk versus LA Knight, that could be a future feud that you get into, and I think they'll tease that even more here. They already have before, and these two have actually interacted very well together, I think, in terms of like having, sort of bit of that edge to both of them where, yes, they're getting cheered by the fans, but they also have kind of those heel tendencies at times, both Punk and LA Knight. And then, of course, you had Jey super kick, both of them, on Raw. And so you've kind of thrown Jey back into the mix here to where he is kind of one where, all right, maybe he kind of ties into something moving forward with these two. But ultimately, I think the problem is that there just is no belief that Seth Rollins is going to lose the championship. And that's not unusual because this is, this era of professional wrestling. In the modern era, how many times have we seen a champion win and go into the next match knowing, okay, there's no way this guy's going to lose. You could throw anyone out there. You could put anyone out there, and there's no chance he's going to lose, right? I mean, it was the same thing we talked about with Cody Rhodes after he won the title at WrestleMania 40. It didn't matter who they put in that spot. Ultimately, it was AJ Styles. You knew Cody was going to retain the title. And so for Rollins here, he's going to retain the title. And I think it's just sort of, that to me is one of those things where it's like, you can probably only do so much to sort of make people think that there is that possibility. The whole story here is just that Punk, LA Knight, and Jey Uso are not on the same page. And it kind of makes it feel, I guess, somewhat predictable that Rollins is going to be able to take advantage of that here. Now, sure, you'll probably have the 3-on-1 in this match at some point, right? You'll have these three kicking Seth Rollins' ass at some point. It's going to happen. But ultimately, the fact that they can't get on the same page is probably going to be the story. And Rollins still has, the help from Bronson Reed. He still has the help from Bron Breakker. Paul Heyman could play a role. All those things on the outside that should still allow him, to walk out with the championship. But I do think this is kind of one of those things where you want to see maybe another little wrinkle added into this Seth Rollins Vision faction here. And maybe this is something where you get a new member who debuts or something like that, right? Could that be a possibility? I think how this match unfolds is probably the biggest story. How Seth Rollins wins is probably the biggest story because, to me, that's the more compelling thing than who's going to win, because the prediction is pretty easy. Seth Rollins is going to retain the World Heavyweight Championship. I'd be shocked if he didn't. Again, I'd be more surprised if Rollins loses than I would be if John Cena loses to Logan Paul. I think that's a more likely option than Rollins losing this championship right now. And he's not going to lose it to CM Punk in a fatal four-way match. If he does eventually lose to Punk, it'll be in a singles match, right? And I don't think Jay's getting the title back right now, and I don't think LA Knight is winning the championship. But we can at least wonder where, just as we talked about earlier, with people like Reigns, with Rusev, what's the direction coming out of this? That's the bigger question, perhaps. And heading into, the new PLE that's been added in WrestlePalooza coming up, next month in September, that's what you got to wonder, is what kind of big match could they have brewing there? Because it does seem like they have Cena versus Lesnar, perhaps Cody versus Drew McIntyre. What's the big match for Rollins there? Could they do Punk versus Rollins? Is that a possibility? They really want to load that show up. It's the first one on ESPN. Could that be where you do that one-on-one match between those two? I just don't think anything other than Seth Rollins retaining is the pick here. And perhaps the bigger, storylines could be who is going to face Rollins coming out of this, and could potentially the Vision have a new member added to the mix. We'll find out. All right, I want your guys' predictions. Always enjoy your feedback. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well. Give me your big predictions for WWE Clash in Paris.